Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Tracy.
And my name is Melissa, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Our guests today are Andy and Mary Ellen Faust, Canadian Americans who have worked with a mission organization focused on Bible translating for over 20 years. Mary Ellen is a recruiter and missions coach, and Andy is an instructor at the Canada Institute of Linguistics. Separately, they spent many years before marriage in former Soviet bloc countries, and then they met in and returned to Central Asia as a young family. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part one of Andy and Mary Ellen's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
Hello and welcome, Mary Ellen and Andy Faust, to our Round Trip Stories. We're so glad you're here to join us today.
Thank you, Tracy. We're happy to be here.
So as a short introduction, they have been members of a mission organization focused on Bible translation for over 20 years. Mary Ellen's a recruiter and mission coach, and Andy is an instructor at Canada Institute of Linguistics. So thank you for joining us and letting us know all about your round trip stories.
Yes, we are really looking forward to getting to hear your stories. And if you are a regular listener of our podcast, you may have already picked up on the fact that for the first time ever, we are actually interviewing two guests at the same time. So this is a bit of a treat to have both Andy and Mary Ellen here with us. And so we're going to get to hear both of their stories and both of their perspectives and experiences together as they share about their moving abroad and back. So as we get started with a bit of the backstory, can you each tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and maybe where you grew up?
I'll start. I grew up in Connecticut with my mom and dad and two older sisters. The first time I moved from this home was to attend the University of New Hampshire. While there, I got involved with a campus ministry called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, or IVCF, which made a huge impact on my life, both spiritually and emotionally. I was so grateful for it. So grateful that after I graduated, I went on staff with IVCF in New Hampshire. In 1997, I joined a team that was connected with InterVarsity and was doing similar Christian work among university students in the country of Uzbekistan, which is in Central Asia and had been a part of the Soviet Union.
You said 1997, so that was 8 years after the Soviet bloc fell?
Yeah.
And what was it like in Uzbekistan?
Yeah, things were opening up. People were very open. They enjoyed meeting new people. It's a very hospitable culture that when you enter, everyone is lining up to have you at their house. You're an honored guest.
If you're single, they'll try to find someone for you to marry.
Yes. Yes. And so I was 31 when I went, so they were all like wondering why I wasn't married, and maybe they could help me find somebody. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Okay. I lived there for 4 years, and then I met Andy at an international church.
Okay.
And then we stayed one more year after that. So total of 5 years.
And I bet everybody was so happy that you found your match there.
Oh, yes. Actually, I had an Uzbek family. And so they were like, well, you need to find a nice man in Uzbekistan. And then when I brought Andy back, they were very excited. See, we told you, you'd find someone in Uzbekistan.
And so how old were you when you met Andy?
I was 35. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Andy, what about you? Where did you grow up?
Well, as I like to say, I didn't grow up anywhere. I just, appeared on the planet and then was moving around because I was a pastor's kid and one of 4 boys, the youngest by several years, actually. So I was the only child at home from the age of 10. But I was born in the U.S. state of Illinois, and my first move was to another city in that same state, when I was 5. A year later, we moved to Iowa, and when I was 10 to Washington State. And during our 4 years there, we lived in 4 different places. And then when I was 14, we moved to the Canadian province of Alberta, where my mother was from. And at age 20, I moved out, and the following year, my parents moved back to the US, to Arkansas. So I entered adulthood without having roots anywhere, and though
Yeah.
there were several places that I was familiar with, I'd say in the background I had this sense of transience. No matter where I was living, that sooner or later I'd be moving on somewhere
Mhm.
else.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And that pattern continued when I was on my own. I became a teacher of English to speakers of other languages, and with a view to doing that overseas. And that is what happened in the 1990s. I spent a total of 6 years in Czechoslovakia and later the Czech Republic, living in 3 different cities. And it
Oh,
was in
wow.
my last year there, I joined a Christian mission organization in Canada and accepted a work assignment in Uzbekistan. And my role there was to help develop a dictionary for Uzbek speakers learning English. So I arrived in early 2000 and lived with a local family, a host family. And after a year, I met Mary Ellen. 6 months later, we got married in New Hampshire.
Nice.
It was all the Uzbek people's prayers that Mary Ellen would find you.
So when you moved abroad together, when was that, and where did you go, and what did you do at that point?
Well, the first time we lived abroad was right after we got married. So, in September 2001, we returned to Uzbekistan, uh, which
Okay.
was the least stressful place for us in the world to start our life as a married couple. We had mutual friends. We continued in the same work that we had been doing, and we were in a place that was just really familiar to both of us. Um,
Mhm.
I'd been living on my own and in apartments, so that's where we ended up settling after we got married. We didn't have kids, so in a lot of ways, we just continued on as we had been as we were singles.
Yeah.
Uh, but we knew that this was just for the short term. We were there not even another year, but it gave us time to figure out what we're going to do as a couple. I was feeling ready for a change of career. Loved working
Mm.
with students, but I was kind of feeling like uh, maybe it was time for something different. And Annie felt drawn to prepare for Bible translation work. So after we returned to New England for a few months in December 2002, we arrived in the Vancouver area. Um, and I was halfway through a pregnancy with my oldest son, Caleb, who was born in April 2003, and our daughter came in June 2005.
Okay.
I would just add that Vancouver was a new place for both of us. Although I had, passed through over the years a number of times, uh, had some relatives and a couple friends there, but it was pretty well new territory.
Yeah, I like to say that was my worst cross-cultural adjustment ever.
Why is that?
Ah,
Because, I don't know, as an American, I just thought Canada and the US, it's the same. Sorry, very
and
same.
they're not.
It's embarrassing now, but yeah, it's not the same.
Right.
And we do things differently in Canada, and it took me. It was like walking with a limp.
Mhm.
Like I just kept stumbling. Like I thought I knew what I was doing, and where is this, and where is that, and why do they do that, and
Mhm. Mhm.
I wasn't prepared for it. Whereas often when we go overseas, we're really prepared for that cross-cultural adjustment. We're studying, we're examining the culture, we're ready for differences.
And you're expecting
Yeah,
it.
I wasn't expecting it. Yeah.
I
So,
can I can relate to that. We spent 3 months, doing training up in Canada in Abbotsford, British Columbia before we did our missions service, and And I don't know if this was our perspective because we're from California. And so, even just from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States, we have different cultures. But for us, we kind of decided that at least the Canadians, the Canada that we were around, that they were sort of like Americans, but on their best behavior, but all the time.
That is so funny.
They were always just more proper and polite. Okay, so what happened after you started working on your program to become a translator?
Well, the whole purpose of that study was to get prepared to head out overseas again. And it was about halfway through my graduate program that I was approached about joining the team that was translating the Bible into the national language of Uzbekistan. And both Mary Ellen and I had separately come to a point that we were truly, like, genuinely open to serving anywhere in the world. But we were very excited about the prospect of going back to Uzbekistan. So before that, though, we needed to go through a 3-month orientation program in St. Petersburg, Russia, and at the same time attend a language school taught Russian to foreigners. So in early June 2006, we sold our townhouse and moved out. Rather traumatic process, liquidating most of our possessions. And we set out
Yeah.
on 8 weeks of travel in the U.S., visiting relatives and friends and churches that were sponsoring our work. And from there, we went to Hungary to a conference and finally landed in St. Petersburg in mid-August. So at that point, Caleb was 3 years old and Abigail was 1.
And how long were you there?
In St. Petersburg,
Yeah.
we were there a total of 14 months, which was much longer than we had initially expected.
Yeah.
I I think we were looking at 3 months. Although St. Petersburg is a very interesting place, this was not where we intended to be this long. It was a really disappointing time of waiting.
Mhm.
We completed the orientation program, but couldn't even attempt to move to Uzbekistan because of the political climate there, which was making it difficult for expatriate workers to remain in the country. And so in May 2007, Andy was able to go there as a tourist and found a language school willing to admit him as a student, but a government department blocked that from going forward.
Mm.
So eventually it was decided that Andy could make a contribution to the Uzbek Bible translation project while working from the country of Kyrgyzstan, which is between Uzbekistan
Oh,
and China. So we called it Next Door Stan. Next Door Stan. So in October of 2007, we packed up again and moved from St. Petersburg to Bishkek, the capital city of Kyrgyzstan. So we were there about a year and a half before returning to the Vancouver area in April 2009. So, and at that point, we thought we'd stay for less than a year, but it turned out to be long term.
What was happening in Uzbekistan that wasn't happening in Kyrgyzstan?
We got caught up in some the winds of geopolitics, and in 2006 was a time when the government of Uzbekistan felt it was not in their best interests to have a lot of expatriate workers there, seeing what was happening, and so they were encouraging them in various ways to leave. Kyrgyzstan, however, was more open to foreigners. We could arrive without having a prior invitation from a sponsoring organization there in the country. And so it'd be fair to describe it as a location of convenience. Upon arrival at the airport, received multiple entry visas for 12 months. And that gave us time then to establish ourselves locally and to find a visa sponsor within the country.
right. We'd like to hear more about your transitions overseas, whether St. Petersburg or Kyrgyzstan, and tell us a story about something that was difficult at first.
Well, I think I'll start with the home. My son, Caleb, had multiple dietary restrictions.
Mm.
And so he was on a pretty strict diet. Um, at the same time, my health had deteriorated probably before we got to Russia. It was already going downhill, but I was not really um, maybe staying on top of that or aware of just how bad I was feeling.
Mhm.
I couldn't gain weight. I was still nursing Abby, so I stopped nursing her, and then really started to have symptoms that look like celiac disease. So,
Mm.
like my diet was now very restricted, and which was helping. It certainly helped with a lot of symptoms, but it was a lot of work to maintain.
Right.
Um, so, uh, yeah, so in Russia, they were actually ahead of us, in the West in terms of having, food for celiacs. Anyway, that I had
Interesting.
at a very yeah, I mean, they had you could get tortellini that were gluten-free and,
Wow.
breads, and yeah, it was amazing. I'm like, "Wow, this is better than, back home." So then when we moved to Kyrgyzstan, that need for adapting the diet, um, it was still there, but now I was having to grind my own flour and
Yeah.
make my own everything that was bread I made, like, so pizza, I made pizza crust and bread and cornbread, and, I think both kids had trouble with dairy, so we didn't give them dairy, but everyone there would give their children dairy, would give them milk. And so I think we had a
Mhm.
neighbor at one point knock on the door and say, "We have extra milk. Can we give you our milk?" And we said,
Mm.
"No, thank you. We don't drink milk." And they couldn't understand. They thought it was, I think they really thought we were not feeding our children well. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, an older Russian woman in Kyrgyzstan, our apartments were on the same stairwell, and she was saying, "So you don't feed your children, porridge with milk for breakfast?" And no, no, we don't. This really bothered her.
Yeah, all the grandmas are usually pretty forthcoming with advice and and saying they think we're doing wrong.
That is a true thing around the world,
yes,
isn't it?
Yeah, the food was took a lot of time to manage.
yes. But we did find some restaurants that would have food that the kids liked, so we would go and they could eat. So we would go there, to these certain places, and that was helpful.
Mhm.
And in Kyrgyzstan, thankfully, we were in the city center and lived, not a long walk, to, a little Chinese grocery store, and they had a lot of rice-based products, so that was good for us.
Yes, they do. The Chinese grocery store, because that was the next door neighbor to the east. All right. Andy, did you want to share a story about some difficulties?
To the extent to which we were in an expat bubble, both in Russia and in Kyrgyzstan, and partly that had to do with our stage of life and, the young children, like in St. Petersburg, we weren't intending to be there for a long
Mhm.
time, and, there we went to a church that had, the sermons were translated into English, so because of that, although it wasn't a international church as such, but it drew a lot of expats, and we gravitated to interacting with them. I think the Russian members of the church maybe had kind of foreigner fatigue.
Mhm.
They were not used to people cycling in and out of their lives
Oh,
so frequently as is an expat reality.
yeah.
And then in Kyrgyzstan, we didn't even have the option because of regulations, government regulations, and so on. We weren't able to go to a local church even if we
Mm.
wanted to. We went to
Mm.
an international church that was in in English. And so then again, drew us into expat circles. When Caleb started kindergarten, now I'm talking about Kyrgyzstan, and that was our choice in terms of our educational plan for the kids and what we thought was best for him and his personality. Uh, we put him into kindergarten at an international school in English, but that school had discounted tuition if the parent would volunteer. So then Mary Ellen got pulled in there 4 hours a week, volunteer teaching at that school. And the very nature of my work, working on the Bible translation project, actually for Uzbek, but it's a part of the world where I need to be discreet about what I was doing. So that was also inhibiting a little bit. I couldn't be as transparent or open with everyone, especially local people, about why I was in their country. Still, kind of those various things. Like you think with young children, oh, well, we'll take them out and meet other parents on the playground. Well, I'm sorry, the other people on the playground with the children are more likely to be their grandparents. But during the daytime hours, most children go to preschool or daycare.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So,
Yeah, I mean, they start very young there. It was, I think, normal in Soviet culture that the children were brought up by the state. So at about the age of 1, they were put into
Oh,
um,
wow.
childcare. So I don't know that they were doing that as much, but we didn't see many children during the
And
day. Yeah.
was this state-run childcare? Like, or like public childcare kind of thing? Or
I think so. I don't know because we never
Right.
used the childcare program. I don't know who actually was running it, but that's probably
Wow.
it was state run.
and I guess I should also say language was another issue that was a barrier. Our Russian was very limited, and we didn't speak Kyrgyz. And generally, Kyrgyz would rather not hear Uzbek spoken to them. So even if they could understand it.
I think we need to clarify one thing because in the former USSR, everybody spoke Russian, right? And so in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, a lot of people would be speaking Russian.
Yes, bilingualism in Russian was very common in the cities. Yes.
Oh, in the cities. Okay.
So you were actually trying to learn Russian for the sake of the other. It's just probably a really hard language to learn.
And when you keep getting sucked into expat circles, it's harder and harder, right?
Well, how about telling us some stories about things that you loved about your time as a family overseas?
So in Russia, we had this delightful opportunity to become friends with this Uzbek man. So he was, of course, a foreigner in Russia, and we were foreigners in Russia. And we had more language in Uzbek than in Russian. So it was really delightful to get to know him. And he would come over and he was really good with our kids. But he was there working because many Uzbeks will go to Russia to work and then send money home. They can just make a better living there. And he was there to work off a debt that he had. So, yeah, it was really lovely to get to know him, and we became good friends with him. And we were able to help him out so he could get back home.
So it's kind of ironic that, the local relationship we had was with another expat, but from Central Asia, and it was a place that we weren't that familiar with. We weren't familiar with his city, but we were somewhat familiar with his country. So it was really beautiful. Yeah, he once he made a trip back home, and he returned with little outfits for our kids and a dress for Mary Ellen, like traditional type costumes.
That's sweet.
Silk, traditional Uzbek dress is silk for women's dresses.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
with the little
Mm.
pantaloons with it, and
Oh,
very
wow.
colorful. Yeah,
That's really a really special relationship.
yeah, it
Um,
was.
and another story, Andy, that you wanted to share about something you loved?
Yeah, well, for me, it was something that developed in in my project, my translation project. Uh, so we were in Kyrgyzstan for about a year and a half. I first had joined the project, but then was not able to move to Uzbekistan. They had to kind of figure out what my role would be, and it was an ongoing process to for me to find my place in that project. And to be contributing things of value to it because I had very limited, actually, language proficiency in either Uzbek or Russian. But the last 6 months of that time, I was able to work closely, collaborating with a teammate, an Uzbek woman. She was married to an American man. This woman was fluent in English. And so, yeah, for 6 months, we worked side by side in an office and I learned how to collaborate in the translation work. And towards the end of that time, I remember one day she turned to me and said, "Yeah, I think we could do this by Skype.
Mm.
We could work remotely if we had to." And we didn't realize that that is what we would end up doing for several
Mhm.
years. But it was the foundation of it was those 6 months
Yeah.
um, together in an office.
That's so valuable because having that in-person time together first as a foundation that then the virtual was just a continuation of is so different. That's neat.
Mary Ellen, can you paint us a picture of what the landscape of Kyrgyzstan was like and how you enjoyed that?
I mean, I love nature, and I think our son really loved being outside. He had lots of energy. He loved being outside, and so we lived in a place where there were trees surrounding the building, and then there were this park. It was a narrow kind of strip of land that just went for quite a long time with grass and
Mm.
playgrounds and trees, and so we enjoyed those walks down that park. And also, there's beautiful mountains in Kyrgyzstan. It's a beautiful country, and we were able to get out and go hiking with Caleb. I guess Abby was with us, but Caleb was the really active one and probably climbed whatever we hiked. He did it like 3 times,
Right.
you know, up and back, up and back.
One of the things that we like to reflect on is how going abroad teaches us things, sometimes about the world around us, but also often about ourselves. So, can you share with us what did you learn about yourself as a result of your time living abroad, either in Russia or Kyrgyzstan?
Well, I definitely learned that the way I was coping with stress was not helpful. And we
Hmm.
had a lot of stress. I had a lot of stress internally. My body was not
Mm.
doing well, and externally. And I dealt with it by denying it and
Mm.
minimizing it. As I reflected on this in later years, in recent years, I realized that part of my issue was I was not valuing
Mm.
my own voice. So I wasn't listening to
Mm.
myself really. So I needed to learn to validate my own voice, that what I had to say or what I was feeling
Mhm.
was valid. Um, and it is a journey of just learning to love myself and respect myself, which
Mhm.
yeah, was lacking. Um, and I've also really come to understand that if I want to hear the voice of God, I need to listen to myself. Like He speaks to
Yes.
us from within.
Mhm.
I know it sounds kind of new age-ish, but I do feel like He loves us and He
Mhm.
loves to hear our voice. And if we're not going to listen to ourselves, we're not going to hear Him because He's
Yeah.
speaking to us, you know,
Yeah.
inside into our hearts. And I was so disconnected during these years from uh, from what I was feeling through all the transitions and struggles, that there was no way that I could really vocalize what I needed or hear how God
Mm.
was guiding. The Enneagram, if people are familiar with that, talks about the
Mhm.
head, heart, and gut. It's very fascinating, and I'm a gut person. Like, I have a feeling or or a sense or a knowing, but it's
Mhm.
not intellectual, and so it's very difficult to validate it or to defend it or even sometimes
Yeah.
to articulate what I'm feeling, especially if I'm not listening to myself or
Mhm.
valuing that. It's been really a journey of learning, sometimes through not speaking up and later really
Mm.
regretting that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so yeah, I am still on that journey of listening to myself and hearing God more clearly.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would have learned it otherwise. It was one of the beautiful things that have come out of
Mm.
these
Mhm.
struggles.
I mean, it's like you're in the fire, right? And you had so many transitions and sometimes, well, maybe we don't have as many resources when we're overseas. I was grateful to have a counselor that
Mhm.
I was Skyped with, and he said to me, "Yeah, if other people were in your situation, they would probably feel the same way." And I was like, "Really?" This is so validating. Thank goodness that we have Skype or now Zoom, and we can be counseled by people in different countries and different time zones. But member care is so important.
I'm so glad you brought that up because we would have conferences with our organization and they would have counselors there. And I remember going to see one, and one of the things that was bothering me was I was struggling with the nanny that we had. She wasn't really a nanny, but she would come and help with the kids. And I felt guilty about
Mhm.
letting her go. I didn't know how to go about it. And this person really helped me work through, like, is there something else that she could do that you wouldn't have to let her go, but she could maybe help
Mhm.
in other ways? And so that was really helpful. Those times at those conferences were helpful. And we also had a woman in our organization that was like in the same neighborhood, and she became like an auntie to the kids and just a really good friend that I could talk to about these things. And so that was really helpful
Mhm.
in terms of um she wasn't a counselor, but she got what I was talking about. She understood what was happening and she could ask
Mhm.
good questions and pray with me. I don't know what I would have
Mhm.
done without Mary Lou. But member care is very important and it was actually something I was interested in pursuing at that time as well.
as a career path.
Mhm.
Mm.
All right, Andy, what about you?
Yeah, it's interesting that one of the things that attracted me towards Bible translation work, of the many things that I maybe could have done as a career path at that point, was a desire to be more
Mm.
rooted. And the time that we were in, the 2 years that I was in Uzbekistan, the Bible translation team there, which at that time I did not as- aspire to join. I wasn't thinking that I wouldn't be end up with that team, although that is what happened. But they had a nice office space. It was kind of a 9 to 5 job in a way. They had good team processes, and I was I was very drawn to that and realized, some other work that might interest me was too transient, and I really needed something more stable at that point in my life. I was into my 30s and was desiring that. So later, being in Russia and Kyrgyzstan, still kind of moving from place to place, as I talked about that trend going back to my
Mhm.
childhood. As we read about things about raising kids, expat kids in that kind of a setting, uh, something that's really stressed in the literature is it's how important it is for them to have a clear sense of where home is in their passport country. Even if it's just a place that they keep going back to periodically, but they can count on it for a soft landing. For example, maybe the home of their
Mm-hmm.
grandparents, let's say. And we knew that our kids certainly did not have that. And of course, remember, they had been very young when we left Canada. They were 3 and 1. But we also came to realize, it would be good for the parents of these kids to know where home is as well in their passport country. And we didn't have that either.
Right.
Okay.
We being Mary Ellen and I didn't have that. So Vancouver, we'd moved there because it was for convenience. I mean, it was for my graduate program, but it was a new place for both of
Yeah.
us. So, and it was intended to be temporary. So, there we were in Central Asia, and not really having a sense of home anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and that probably I can see how that would make you realize that in a way that you hadn't even necessarily maybe realized before, in a different way.
Yeah, it wasn't until I was raising these
Yeah.
kids, and it's like, okay, what do they need, and how can I help them get what they need? How can I, as a parent,
Right.
how can we as parents do that? So it brought it into focus in a way that had never really connected clearly in my mind before.
Oh, that's insightful. So, as we get ready to close our first half, our part 1 of your stories, what can you share about what you learned about the world as a result of your time living abroad?
I think for me, it became so clear to me that we often people would be afraid for me that I was going overseas, and it was
Mm,
after 9/11, and people were worried, "Aren't you afraid of going back?" And I always said, I don't think there's any safer place to be than in
mm,
the will of God. You have these visions of some place being, awful, but it's just a news story about one thing, like you get there and people are people,
mhm,
there's good people and there's bad
mhm,
people everywhere. I always felt, very welcomed, and always found places that we enjoyed being, and like the world seemed a little less scary, a little more
mhm.
accessible. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Thank you, Andy.
We look forward to hearing more of your stories in part 2 of our interview.
Thank you, Andy and Mary Ellen, for sharing your round trip stories from Russia and Kyrgyzstan. You are so ready to move abroad again, with dreams of raising kids overseas and making important contributions to translation projects in the Uzbek language. With several unexpected detours, including a longer than expected stay in Russia and a move to Kyrgyzstan instead of Uzbekistan, you tried to stay firm in your goals. You found fellowship and support in an unexpected place, the expat community, even when it came to making your own flour for health reasons. Mary Ellen learned to find her voice and listen to her gut, literally, and worked at taking care of her along with her own kids' health. Andy found roots in his own family and his translation project team, and soon realized that he could support them from anywhere in the world. So what happened when Andy and Mary Ellen returned to Canada? You have to make a return trip to our podcast for part 2 of their round trip story.
Want the podcast equivalent of early boarding and first-class seating? Be sure to subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, would you consider sharing it with your fellow globe-trotting friends? We would love to encourage them too. We believe that sharing stories helps our understanding of the world grow larger while the distance between us grows smaller.
As this episode lands, we hope these stories have encouraged you, helped you find some more of your belongings, and made your baggage a little lighter. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.